The Security Operations Center smelled like cinnamon rolls instead of panic sweat and overheating silicon. That scent did not belong in a room designed to detect disasters before they could get started. The second clue was the projection wall. My incident heat map, the one I built to show threat vectors in real time, had been replaced with a pastel slide deck titled The Glow Up of Resilience. There were floating hearts. There was a font that looked like it had feelings. There was a photo of a lighthouse wearing sunglasses. My name is Dana Cross. I am 41. I keep 3 regional data hubs and 1 private satellite uplink from turning into a very expensive paperweight. For 7 years, I have been the person who gets called when alarms scream in 20 languages. I do not do office politics. I do not do team-building trust falls. I do the kind of work that prevents lawsuits, headlines, and a sudden desire to move into a cabin with no internet. I used to be invisible in a comforting way, like a fire extinguisher. Then the heir arrived. Evan Kincaid, 33, interim VP of Platform Continuity, son of the founder, swagger of a man who thinks confidence is a credential. He walked into Sky Morrow Systems on a Monday, wearing a blazer that cost more than my first car, and a smile that said, "I have never been wrong, because I have never been corrected." He did not come alone. He brought Marlo Lark, his personal brand strategist and wellness partner, a woman who spoke in captions. She introduced herself by saying she was building an intention-driven ops culture. Then she handed everyone mood cards. I watched her set a crystal bowl on my console. My console. She did a sound bath. In the SOC. While a phishing campaign was actively trying to impersonate our payroll provider. Evan clapped at the end, like the bowl had just solved encryption. After that, my calendar started losing meetings. My tickets started getting reassigned. My access requests began failing in small, petty ways, like the system had learned passive aggression. Meanwhile, Marlo hosted daily sessions called Calm Command. She moved 2 chairs into the SOC and called it a creative corner. Then Evan asked me for a summary. I wrote him a risk brief. 90 pages. Vendor renewal dates, access control maps, disaster recovery timelines. One section in bold. Do not grant emergency administrator privileges without credential escrow and board notice. He replied with a single message. Looks intense. Can you vibe it down? That was when I started preparing, quietly, like a pilot checking a parachute while everyone else argues about the playlist. I documented everything. I printed audit trails. I archived approvals. I created a sealed packet for legal. I wrote a clean exit plan with no drama and no threats. Then I did the part Evan would never understand. Years earlier, after a client breach almost took us under, I built a compliance safeguard called Sentinel Ladder. It was not a trap. It did not break anything. It simply watched for specific conditions: unreviewed privilege escalation, vendor key revocation, and policy deletions. If those conditions stacked, Sentinel Ladder would begin isolating high-risk modules, step by step, and it would notify vendors and auditors according to contract. It was a seatbelt, unless someone decided to drive into a wall while filming a live stream. On Friday, I saw a new sign taped to the SOC door. Marlo Lark is reimagining this space. Please do not bring negative energy inside. I walked in anyway. I removed the crystal bowl from my console and set it beside the shredder, where it belonged. On Monday at 10:14 a.m., Evan pinged me. Dana, quick sync in my office. Bring your laptop. Smile emoji. I stared at the message long enough to consider faking my own abduction. Then I stood up and walked toward the glass office everyone called the aquarium. Inside, Evan did not look up from his phone. Marlo sat on the conference table in a silk jumpsuit, sipping something green that looked like lawn clippings with ambition. Evan finally raised his eyes and said, Dana, we are making a leadership evolution. Marlo smiled like she was about to announce a new candle scent. Evan continued, we need people who match the new frequency. Your approach is, well, legacy. I nodded once. My pulse stayed calm, which surprised me. Then he said, "Today is your last day, effective immediately." Marlowe added, "No shame, just a redirection." I set my badge on the desk. Evan leaned back, relieved. "Great. HR will—" "You have 60 minutes," I said. He blinked. 60 minutes for what? "For the company to learn what resilience actually costs," I replied. Then I walked out before my face could give away how much I wanted to laugh and scream at the same time. In the elevator, my phone buzzed. First text: "Payroll cannot log in." Second text: "Vendor portal rejected our keys." Third text: from an unknown number. Why are all the dashboards blinking amber? I did not answer. I stepped into the parking lot, inhaled air that did not smell like cinnamon, and got into my car. Behind me, Sky Morrow Systems was still standing. For now. I drove home like a person leaving a bad haircut appointment, trying to act normal while silently planning revenge on the mirror. I did not touch a single line of code. I did not remote in. I did not whisper to the servers like a witch. I simply let the world continue without me, which is the most offensive thing you can do to people who believe they are the sun. At home, I opened an old rugged tablet I kept for travel emergencies. Offline logs, cached alerts, nothing illegal, just the same monitoring view Sky Morrow never bothered to modernize because I had already made it bulletproof. The screen lit up and greeted me with a familiar calm. Then the first tremor. A minor permissions drift in our Milwaukee node. A vendor token expiring notice that someone had dismissed. A warning that read like a polite cough before pneumonia. I watched the log entries scroll and felt something settle in my chest. Not joy, not cruelty. A simple, clean certainty. Evan and Marlowe were not smarter than gravity. At 1:03 p.m., Marlowe made her first major change. She renamed our primary incident channel from SOC, critical, to glow room emergencies. She posted a message with 3 sparkle emojis and a reminder to hydrate. At 1:19 p.m., Evan posted an all-hands note titled, "New Era, New Energy." He described me as a valued contributor who had chosen a different path. He described Marlowe as a strategic continuity lead. He described the platform as scalable, sleek, and ready. He did not describe the contracts that required audited access controls. At 2:07 p.m., my tablet chimed again. Vendor key revocation request initiated under Marlowe credentials. That was a big one. There were reasons we never revoked a key without replacement staged. Those reasons were measured in lawsuits. I got a call from a number I did not recognize. I let it ring. Then it rang again. On the third call, I answered without speaking. "Dana," Evan said, voice pitched toward friendly panic. "Hey, weird question. Are you near your laptop?" Silence. "We are seeing a few odd permission errors," he continued. "Probably just settling in. But if you could, sanity check the dashboard. Totally casual." I ended the call. Not angry, not triumphant. Simply done. By evening, the errors multiplied like rabbits with a grudge. Client reporting tools timed out. Our customer success portal stalled on login. The ticket system froze on a request about office coffee pods, which felt poetic. At 7:44 p.m., Sentinel Ladder moved from passive observer to first rung. It did not shut anything down. It isolated high-risk admin actions. It demanded validation for privilege escalations. It began sending compliance pings to vendors exactly as the contracts required. This is the part most people do not understand. A safeguard does not care about your intentions. It cares about your actions. Marlowe tried to log into the vendor console at 8:02 p.m. The system returned. Access restricted. Escrow validation required. She posted a screenshot in the Glow Room Emergencies channel with the caption, "Does anyone know what this means? No fear, only flow." Someone replied with a gif of a spinning cat. Evan replied, "We are fine. Keep vibing." At 9:15 p.m., the first vendor email arrived in my personal inbox. Not from Sky Morrow. From Dromkey Solutions, our authentication broker. Subject: Notice of Compliance Lockout Initiation. I poured a glass of cheap red wine and read the body. It was clinical. It was polite. It was devastating. Per contract clause, unauthorized admin privilege escalation has triggered external audit posture. Service continuity may be impacted unless escrow authority is restored. Escrow authority. That meant me, or a board-approved replacement. There was no replacement. Evan had never assigned one, because assigning one would require admitting I mattered. At 10:30 p.m., another email, this time from our satellite uplink provider. Subject: Credential chain invalidation warning. At 11:11 p.m., a final ping. Sentinel ladder status update. Rung 2 armed. Countdown enabled. That made me sit up straight. I had designed the countdown years ago as a last resort, meant to give leadership a window to correct course. It only activated when multiple policies were violated in sequence, like a lock that closes slowly so nobody can claim it slammed. I did not expect Evan and Marlowe to speed-run incompetence. The countdown appeared on my screen at 11:13 p.m. Time remaining, 8:59:42, 8 hours. Enough time to do the right thing, or enough time to prove they never would. I slept anyway. Not peacefully, not smugly, but with the strange calm of someone who has spent years holding up a collapsing ceiling and has finally stepped out of the room. At 6:07 a.m., my tablet woke me with a new alert. Board notification initiated. Contractual audit path engaged. Legal exposure, severe. I rubbed my eyes, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the screen. This was no longer about broken dashboards. This was about accountability. I had been invisible until the moment invisibility became a luxury Skymorrow could not afford. At 6:45 a.m., a message arrived from an unknown sender. He is landing today. Founder is furious. Founder: Martin Kincaid, Evan father. The man who once thanked me for saving a client contract by handing me a coffee and saying, "Dana, you are the spine of this place." I had not heard from him in years. Now he was coming home to a company blinking amber, with a wellness influencer guarding the controls like a decorative scarecrow. The countdown kept ticking. I did not smile. I simply watched the numbers fall and wondered how many people it would take before Evan realized that a vibe is not a firewall. Martin Kincaid arrived at headquarters at 8:12 a.m. with jet lag in his eyes and fury in his posture. He did not stop for greetings. He did not accept the welcome packet. He walked past reception like a storm wearing a tailored coat. He went straight to the executive suite and opened the private continuity dashboard, the one built for emergencies and reserved for leadership. I knew what he saw because my tablet mirrored the same truth. 7 nodes in amber, 2 in red, and the satellite uplink pulsing like a warning light on an airplane panel. Martin clicked into the uplink. A message appeared. Escrow authority required. Contact compliance signatory. He clicked into authentication. Another message. External audit posture active. Vendor contact engaged. He clicked into incident control. The screen showed a single line. Sentinel ladder active. Countdown. 1:46:18. That was when he summoned everyone. Not an email. Not a polite meeting invite. A full-blown emergency. Get your shoes on summons. The boardroom filled with executives pretending they were not sweating. Legal arrived with binders. Finance arrived with a face that said, "Do not do this to me." Engineering arrived with haunted eyes. Human resources arrived with a smile that looked stapled on. Evan arrived last, jogging, holding a protein shake like it was a shield. Marlowe floated behind him, carrying a ring light and a notebook labeled Vibrational Authority. Martin stood at the head of the table with his hands flat on the wood. "Who authorized tier-level privilege changes without escrow review?" he asked. Evan raised his chin. "We are modernizing, Dad. We are cutting legacy friction." Marlowe nodded so hard her earrings swung like pendulums. We are moving from fear-based governance to trust-based leadership. Martin did not blink. He turned to legal counsel. Do we have indemnity coverage if this triggers client outages? Counsel cleared his throat. That depends on Clause 14, subsection C. Personnel changes affecting control authority require board approval. If not, indemnity can be void. Evans smiled like he had not heard the words. It is fine. We have redundancy. Martin looked at him as if seeing a stranger. Redundancy is a design, not a prayer. Then Martin asked the question that made the room go silent. Where is Dana Cross? Evan shifted. She does not work here anymore. Martin inhaled, slow and sharp. You terminated the compliance signatory during an active policy transition. Evan tried to laugh. It was not like that. She was, rigid. She did not align. Marlowe leaned forward. Dana was operating from scarcity. Martin turned his head toward Marlowe with the gentleness of a guillotine. Do not speak again, he said. Not until you can define escrow. Marlowe opened her mouth, then closed it, eyes wide. The ring light remained off, mercifully. Martin looked back at Evan. Call Dana. Evan fumbled for his phone. She is not answering. Martin nodded once. Of course she is not. At 9:03 a.m. my phone buzzed. Unknown number, no subject, just a text. Boardroom, 10 o'clock, come alone, no signature, no politeness, just urgency. I did not reply. I did not need to. At 9:47 a.m., I walked into the Sky Morrow lobby wearing jeans, boots, and a hoodie that still smelled faintly like last night's wine. I carried my rugged tablet in a plain canvas bag. No blazer, no makeup, no performance. Marcus from security, the one who used to bring me vending machine pretzels during overnight incidents, watched me approach and gave a single slow nod, like a guard opening a gate for a returning commander. No one stopped me. Not HR, not a receptionist, not even the new wellness poster that said, "Breathe through the chaos." The elevator lifted me to the top floor. When the doors opened, the hallway was quiet in that way offices get when something has died and people are waiting to see if it comes back. I entered the boardroom at 9:58 a.m. Heads turned. Evan looked like a man watching his own bad decisions come down the stairs. Marlowe looked furious, as if my presence had ruined her aesthetic. Martin looked tired. Not old, not broken, just tired in the way only a founder looks when their company starts acting like a stranger. Dana, he said, voice low. Did you sabotage us? No, I replied. I did what I always did. I built safeguards. You all chose to trip them. He swallowed. Can you stop the countdown? Yes, I said. But first I want the room to understand what is happening. I placed the tablet on the table, tapped the screen, and projected a timeline. Policy deletions under Marlowe credentials. Privilege escalations without escrow. Vendor key revocation. Contract clause activation. External audit initiation. I turned to legal counsel. You know I am correct. Counsel nodded, pale. I turned to Martin. You have 17 minutes until the uplink isolation begins. After that, our satellite client loses service. They will sue. They will win. Martin exhaled. Then he looked at Evan. You did this, he said. You did this because you wanted to play executive. Evan stood up. Dad, come on. She is exaggerating. The screen beeped softly. Countdown. 001652. I looked at Evan with calm that felt sharper than anger. I am not exaggerating, I said. I am measuring. Martin stared at the numbers and finally understood. Not just the risk, the consequence. He turned to me. What do you need? I did not ask for an apology. Apologies are cheap and non-refundable. I asked for something better. Access, authority, and a meeting after the fire was out, where we discussed why the person who saved this company for years was treated like an outdated accessory. Martin nodded once. Done. Evan opened his mouth again. Martin held up a hand. You are finished talking. I tapped the tablet and entered my original escrow code, a sequence only I had ever used because only I had ever been trusted to use it properly. One by one, the red lights on the dashboard turned amber, then green. The countdown vanished. The room breathed again. But I was not done. Not even close. When the last node turned green, the boardroom atmosphere shifted from panic to shame, which is a quieter kind of chaos. It looks like people sitting very still while their egos try to crawl out of their throats. Martin rubbed his forehead with the hand of a man calculating how many zeros this almost cost him. Legal counsel whispered to finance. Engineering stared at me like I had walked in with a fire extinguisher and a judge. Evan looked like he wanted the floor to open and swallow him, but he still had enough arrogance to try. He cleared his throat. Dana, look, we can figure out a consulting arrangement. You come in sometimes, we keep things smooth. Everyone wins. I turned my head slowly. Evan, you fired me with a smile emoji. He blinked. That was, tone management. Martin slammed a palm on the table, not hard, but final. Evan, stop. Silence again. Marlo shifted in her chair and tried to recover control of the room the way influencers do, by narrating it. I think this is a powerful moment of... Martin pointed at her without looking. If you finish that sentence, you will be escorted out. Marlo shut her mouth. The vibrational authority notebook stayed closed. Martin turned back to me. Dana, I owe you an explanation. Evan made choices that... I held up a finger. I do not need a bedtime story. I need the company to become structurally incapable of doing this again. Martin nodded. What does that look like? I slid a thin folder across the table. No dramatic flourish, just paper, crisp and patient. Addendum 6, I said. The one you authorized during the Toronto compliance disaster. Martin frowned and opened it. His eyes moved left to right. Then they stopped moving. He read a line again, slower. Then he looked up at me with a face that said he had just discovered gravity has a second job. Evan leaned forward, curious, like a child peeking into an oven. Martin swallowed. This is the continuity equity clause. Yes, I replied. Evan scoffed. That sounds fake. That sounds like a nerd revenge fanfic. Legal counsel made a strangled noise. Not fake, he said. It is filed, it is signed, it is active. Martin kept reading, and the room changed color. The clause was simple, brutal, elegant. For every data hub stabilized under a 12-month uninterrupted cycle by the named continuity architect, the company grants a voting equity unit held in trust, convertible upon board failure to maintain escrow compliance. I built 7 hubs. I stabilized them. I did it on paper and in code, with audit logs and vendor sign-offs. I did it while Evan was learning how to pronounce operational. Those units were not a gift. They were a safeguard, a way to ensure the company could never casually discard the person responsible for keeping it alive. Martin looked down at the final page and went very still. Evan whispered, "What does that mean?" Legal counsel answered before Martin could. It means she holds controlling interest if the board violates escrow compliance and triggers audit posture, which happened. This morning. Evan stared at me as if I had just revealed I was also the building. You cannot, he said. You cannot just own it. I tilted my head. I did not just own it. I earned it. Marlo finally spoke, voice trembling. This is so toxic. Martin stared at her. Marlo, you tried to revoke authentication keys because the dashboard color palette stressed you. You do not get to use the word toxic. Marlo stood up. Evan, tell them. Tell them this is unfair. Evan looked at his father. Dad, you cannot let her do this. Martin closed the folder and exhaled. Evan, I already did. Years ago. When I signed the clause because Dana saved us from disaster, and I wanted to ensure she never had to beg for respect. Evan opened his mouth, then shut it. Martin turned to the board. By my authority as founder and chair, I am initiating executive removal for gross negligence. Evan Kincaid is relieved of all operational duties effective immediately. Evan shot to his feet. This is insane. She set me up. I kept my voice calm. No, Evan. I built guardrails. You drove into them. Martin gestured to security. Marcus appeared at the door like he had been waiting for this scene his entire career. Evan looked around, desperate. Dana, come on. We can talk like adults. I smiled, small and sharp. We can. Adults read contracts. Marlo grabbed her ring light and stormed toward the door, muttering about energy vampires. Marcus opened the door for her with the courtesy reserved for people leaving a burning building they started. Evan followed, slower, face red, then pale. Before he crossed the threshold, he turned back. You think you won? I looked at him and finally allowed myself the tiniest bit of satisfaction. I do not think, I said. I monitor. The door closed. The room stayed silent. Martin looked at me. What now? Now, I said. We rebuild the structure so the company survives, even when someone tries to replace competence with a mood board. He nodded. You want the CEO seat? I shook my head. Titles are shiny distractions. I want escrow authority codified, vendor contracts reviewed, and a board policy that treats continuity like oxygen. Martin swallowed and said, You will have all of it. I leaned back in my chair, not triumphant, just steady. Revenge, I realized, was not the collapse. Revenge was watching them understand exactly who had been holding the world together. By afternoon, Sky Morrow systems looked normal again on the outside, which is how corporate trauma prefers to dress. People walked the halls carrying laptops. Someone refilled the coffee machine. A manager laughed too loudly at a joke that was not funny, like laughter could erase the morning. Inside the bones of the company, everything had changed. I sat in a smaller conference room with legal counsel, finance, and Martin. No champagne, no victory speech, just clean, deliberate work, the kind that lasts longer than revenge fantasies. First, we reissued escrow authority under a formal continuity charter. Not Dana has access because Dana is here, but Dana has access because the company requires it for survival. We added 2 deputies, vetted, trained, and rotated, so no one person would ever be forced to be a single point of sanity again. Second, we audited every vendor contract Marlo had touched. The results were a museum exhibit of careless hands, a revoked token here, a disabled alert there, a renamed policy group that now read, Sparkle Protocol. I did not laugh. I highlighted. I fixed. Martin watched me work, and finally said the quiet thing founders rarely say out loud. I let you become invisible. I kept my eyes on the screen. I let myself become invisible because it was safer than being noticed by people who confuse charisma with competence. He nodded slowly, like the truth hurt, but deserved to hurt. At 4:10 p.m., HR knocked and entered with the careful posture of someone approaching a sleeping bear. They handed Martin a resignation letter. Marlo Lark, the HR director said softly. Effective immediately. Also, she requested that we mail her her desk plant. Martin blinked. She had a desk plant, HR nodded. It is plastic. That made me laugh once, sharp and brief, like a pressure valve opening. Even Martin smiled, tired. At 5:03 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. One sentence. This is not over. I did not need to guess Evan. I did not respond. I forwarded it to legal counsel, who sighed the sigh of someone who has just met a new recurring headache. Later that evening, Martin asked me to attend a company-wide meeting. No, I refused. He looked surprised. I stood and adjusted my hoodie sleeve. I am not your symbol. I am your system. If you need a hero speech, hire an actor. He nodded again, humbled, and did not argue. I walked out of headquarters the way I had walked out the week before, except this time no one pretended I was a disposable accessory. Marcus from security held the door. He said, "Good to have you back." I paused. "I am not back, Marcus. I am forward." He grinned. "Fair enough." Outside, the evening air felt cooler, like the city had stopped holding its breath. I got into my car and drove toward my apartment, not because I was escaping, but because I finally had a choice. At home, I opened my rugged tablet one last time and checked the dashboards. All green. Not because the company loved me, because the company now respected reality. I shut the tablet and let the silence settle. Revenge stories usually end with fireworks, a public humiliation, a mic drop, a villain crying into a smoothie. Mine ended with signatures and policies and a charter that ensured nobody could ever casually delete the backbone again. Still, there was one more loose thread. 2 days later, legal counsel called me with a voice that meant they had news and none of it was adorable. "Evan filed a claim," he said. "Wrongful termination. Defamation. Some nonsense about coercion." I listened, calm. Then I asked, "Did he sign his termination letter?" "Yes." "Did he sign the privilege escalation approvals?" "Yes." "Did he sign the message praising Marlowe for cutting legacy friction?" "Yes." I heard pages flipping. "He also posted it publicly," counsel added, like it was a badge. I exhaled. "Then we will respond with facts," I said. "Facts are the meanest revenge because they do not need emotion." Counsel laughed once, relieved. That weekend, a settlement offer arrived. Evan wanted a payout and a non-disparagement clause. He wanted to leave with dignity he had not earned. I told counsel to decline. Instead, we offered something else: a mutual release, no money, and a requirement that Evan complete a corporate governance program before holding any executive role within any company Martin funded. Martin approved it without hesitation. Evan did not. He went to social media, of course. He posted vague rants about betrayal and toxic workplaces. He did interviews where he described himself as a visionary misunderstood by rigid technicians. Then the vendors released their compliance notices, and the timeline became public through legal discovery. His interviews aged like milk. Clients stayed. The board stabilized. Sky Morrow moved on. And me, I bought myself a new chair for my home office, the kind with proper lumbar support, because revenge is satisfying, but back pain is forever. Some nights, I still smelled cinnamon and remembered Marlowe's sound bath in the SOC. The absurdity of it, the arrogance, the way Evan smiled when he thought he had erased me. Then I would check the charter, the escrow authority, the deputies trained and ready, and I would sleep. Not because I had destroyed them, because I had made sure they could never destroy me again.